Let's see. Hey, man.
Doing all right?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me
Yeah,
okay?
man. How about you? Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay, good. Good, man. Are you got your recording setup going?
Trying my best. Just taking it piece by piece.
Okay.
But basically, like Instagram will let me download this as soon as it's done.
Oh, that's cool.
So
That's really nice.
that's why I was trying to do it from this profile, so that as soon as I cut it, I can save it to my camera roll and post it from there.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah,
That's
I'm
really
super
great.
excited about that.
Helps.
Thanks for being
That
here.
helps. Yeah, man. Thanks for asking me. So,
Yeah, for sure.
have you got questions?
I do have some questions. I really. What was that?
I said, I hope they're not hard.
They shouldn't be too hard. No, I'm just really excited. So, I mean, a little bit just kind of about what my idea is behind this.
Okay.
So, I guess first thing, we got kind of tasked by our percussion professor at school to kind of figure out. So he had one assignment that was, I don't know if you're familiar with Will James. He's an orchestral percussionist, and he has this whole curriculum about standard percussion repertoire. So we're doing that,
Awesome.
but then we have like a secondary kind of assignment
Okay.
that was kind of left up to our decision. It's kind of free form.
Yeah.
And it was kind of just to explore and
Okay.
to have fun. So kind of what I'm thinking behind this is I'd love to talk to a bunch of different people who are successful in the field and who are doing things that I would love to try to do.
Sure.
And just talk about that process and how you got there, what you're doing, what's coming up, and those kind of things.
Sure.
And so I definitely want it to be like, I'm a student. There's so much that I'm excited to learn. And so I just want to take this time where everybody's kind of stuck at home to learn this stuff and to figure some stuff out.
That sounds good, man. That
Yeah.
sounds really good. So in the percussion repertoire class, is it just like straight percussion, like repertoire, like studying kind of the standard material for each instrument and then kind of what's new with the instrument, or?
Yeah, it's mostly just kind of the standard, like orchestral rep, those excerpts that everybody plays 1,000 times over.
Yeah.
And so basically it's a folder for each piece, an excerpt,
Okay.
where he has a playthrough video where he's doing it kind of in an audition setting. And then there's another video where he's kind of diving into it and explaining it.
Okay.
And it's really cool to have both that reference recording. Because a lot of these excerpts, there's a lot of students that post videos for when they're taking auditions, but there's not a lot of resources for people to see professionals doing it, just the excerpt by itself.
Right.
Which is super cool to see.
That's an excellent resource, because I mean, that wasn't back when I was studying, YouTube didn't exist, and it was basically like you had to see somebody do it live
right
in your lesson, or go to a clinic, or go take another lesson outside of your lessons. You had to kind of seek out the information. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, yeah, thanks again for being here. So I guess for people watching who don't know you, if you want to just like give us a quick run through of your story, like how you got where you are, education experience and those kind of things, anything that contributed to that.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I've been playing drums. I don't really remember. I was kind of probably like yourself. It was like just the drums found me. My dad was a band director, so I was always around music equipment, and he was a percussion major and a voice major. So then he went into music education, started conducting and doing a lot of teaching. So it's kind of bizarre. He was one of the best teachers I had, but he wasn't like the best drummer or percussionist. He was just an exceptional musician with great intuition and great teaching skills. He was an incredible musician. So it was, to say he was like a great drum teacher or a great drummer, it's kind of interesting because you have like me, Kevin Bobo, who's a phenomenal marimba artist, and then another friend of mine, Tyler Dempsey, who is a snare drum just slayer. He went more into the marching band thing and now teaches in Austin and won individuals for DCI 3 or 4 years in a row. All three of us at some point studied with my dad when we were in high school.
Wow.
So yeah, it's kind of bizarre, you know, and we're all kind of in our own right doing professionally, you know, something in the percussion world. So I'm the oldest of the three compadres. We were friends, but we were scattered in age. So Tyler and I have stayed in contact. I was more friends with Kevin Bobo's brother, Bill,
Okay.
who was my age. We were in school together. But like from very little, I remember I literally have my first practice pad sitting over there, with the head busted. It's the old Ludwig one with the metal frame, and it's like so old. I used to just jam on that when I was like 5 or 6 because my parents were really tired of me, number one, destroying pots and pans, and then secondarily destroying Lincoln log boxes by just like the box that came, the Lincoln logs back in the day looked like a tiny little floor tom.
Right.
So I would just beat the crap out of it. Um, so I mean, I believe it or not, I don't remember learning how to do a buzz roll. I just remember doing it. So there's a lot of natural ability. I don't really know exactly where that came from. Definitely, I mean, now being a person that is of faith, I attribute a lot of my gift and just a recognition of my gift to God. But the rest is on me to kind of develop it. So, the other gift that I have is I don't know when to quit. So I just keep going after it. I'm like you, I'm still a student of the craft of drums. I'm still learning a lot. So just to speed it up, I did middle school band, high school band. I did all the different ensembles that were special ensembles, district, state, regional honor bands, summer music camps, you know, I then all that stuff. And I was involved in all of that. So I was packing my resume with just about anybody in a public school would do to try and get into a music school. I think it was my sophomore year of high school, I realized that the gift that I had, if I was willing to really hunker down, that I could probably pay for college. So my junior year, I went and auditioned at a lot of different colleges, and just so happened that Florida State, which has a phenomenal school of music,
Right.
back then there were only two public schools of music, Florida State and Indiana. And I didn't audition at Indiana for whatever reason. I didn't get out there. I just went to Florida State, several other schools, and Florida State came back with a full ride. So I ended up going there. And the thing I liked about Florida State was there was a social aspect that I didn't see at the other conservatories of music. Having done, I wasn't like a great athlete, but I was involved in basketball and tennis, and I'd always had an athletic side to me. So I was really kind of, I'm naturally an introvert, but I liked being around people. You know, it's kind of weird. Like I didn't want to not have a social life, or at least I didn't want to have a social life that was completely wrapped up with like just a bunch of musicians, which ended up happening naturally.
Right.
You know, so I got a scholarship to Florida State. I went down there for a year. In the midst of that, I'd gotten the bug for jazz. So my entire background was really was percussion, you know, mallets, snare drum, timpani, multiple percussion. During my senior or junior year, I marched drum and bugle corps and marched DCI. So I marched snare drum and a drum and bugle corps.
Where'd you march?
I marched with the Colts.
Okay. Cool.
And so I marched with the Colts and marched snare. And then my senior year, someone gave me a copy of J Mood by Wynton Marsalis, and I really fell in love with that music. So what was really bizarre was that I went to Tallahassee, which is where Florida State is, and coincidentally, that's also where Wynton Marsalis, who was getting a lot of his musicians. A lot of people lived in Marcus Roberts, his piano player at the time, lived in Tallahassee,
Oh man.
and a lot of guys that were part of Marcus's band. And there are a bunch of people over in Jacksonville, Florida, which is only about 2 hours away from Tallahassee in the panhandle of Florida. And then you're only about maybe about 4.5 if I'm driving to New Orleans. So, you know, we're kind of in an interesting spot. So I would go to this jam session where Marcus Roberts was playing and Herb Harris and a lot of cats that were like in Marcus's band that all knew Winton. And I would sit in and get my butt kicked. And I just had enough of getting my butt kicked. Because what I'd done was I transcribed a bunch of records. And this, because I had notational chops from studying with my dad. So I transcribed like Jimmy Cobb's ride cymbal pattern or Tony Williams' ride cymbal pattern. And for that amount of time, I really was into Jeff Watts because he played with Winton during that era, which was like the late 80s, 90s. So anyway, I went down there, got my butt kicked. I mean, had a full ride, and I marched in the marching band because it was sort of a fraternity, and my dad had gone to Florida State, so I kind of had it kind of felt like I needed to do that just in terms of the collegiate experience and being my father's son. So I marched in the drum line as a performance major, which was not something a lot of people did. So it put a lot of extra pressure on me in terms of time,
Right.
which I liked it. I mean, you know, I had that experience. So I made a ton of friends that were not in the music world at the music school, did that. And further got the jazz bug while I was in Tallahassee to the point where I was like, I need to go study drum set because they didn't really have an official drum set teacher at the time at Florida State. They had somebody adjunct. He was a really nice guy, good player, but I just was wanting more, and I'd always wanted to go to Berkeley. So I left Florida State, left full ride, and used what money I had in savings to invest in going to Berkeley for a year. And there I picked John Ramsey was my teacher. I picked John, wanted to study with John because he had studied with Alan Dawson and also had worked with Art Blakey. Art Blakey in the 80s had a big band with two drummers, and John happened to be the second drummer in this big band.
Wow.
While in that big band were the Marsalis brothers and a whole host of other people. So John came from a real straight ahead background. His roommate was Bob Moses. I don't know if he is anymore, but so it was really interesting to go to Berkeley. Once again, getting my butt kicked. When I showed up there, you know, Abe Laboriel Jr. was finishing school there. Johnny Rabb was entering school. Little John Roberts was entering school. We were all kind of coming in at the same time. And I know all those guys. We're not like, Johnny and I have stayed in contact and are good. I would consider him a good friend. Little John and I know of each other. Another great drummer that was there, who's a good friend while I was at Berkeley, was Gintis Janusonis, who's gone into the hip hop realm. He's a Sabian artist like myself. So there's a lot of guys that were there that have continued on in the music business like myself. So I was there for a year, studied drum set entirely, played a bazillion jam sessions. On the spring break, the winter break, I came home I lived in the butt crack of Missouri, like this really small town in the northwest corner of Missouri. Went home, and the jazz studies professor at the school my dad was teaching at the college, he was like, hey, Carnival Cruise Lines is looking for musicians that don't have any substance abuse problems, can do the gig, can read, play all styles. If you send in a demo cassette. So he told about 10 of us, and I was the only one who sent it in, and I got the gig. So I came home from Berkeley, was hanging out, and this is back before cell phones. We had like a tape, whatever, message machine or something. And I answered the phone because I was home for the summer, and I was kind of like debating, like it was early May, and I was like, okay, I probably need to go get a job. Never heard from the Carnival Cruise Lines, blah, blah, blah. We didn't have email. You know, this is like early 90s. Email was not really happening unless you're in the government.
Right.
So, and I know that because I had a friend whose dad worked for the government, and he had email way before we did. So I say that with knowledge that there, but and it was the guy from Carnival Cruise Lines. I take that gig, went back to Florida State, had an incredible experience. The guys in the big band, I was the youngest. I was 20, and the next oldest guy was 30. The rhythm section was like, the sax section was like, almost all of them were taking a break from North Texas. So they had, the sax section was like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock sax section. Maynard Ferguson's cousin, like nephew, amazing. Maynard Ferguson's nephew was playing trumpet, Pete Ferguson. A couple of the trombone players had just come off the road with Harry Connick. Come to find out, like about 4 weeks later, I found out I had joined one of the better, like the top band in all Carnival Cruise Lines and didn't even know it. Thank God I didn't know that when I was there. So I started playing in this big band, and the lead trumpet player, who's still a friend of mine, lives in New York and is a great teacher up there. He was like, hey man, here's a stack of records. And he gave me a stack of Basie records and Ellington records. And he's like, listen and learn these because we're playing all these charts, all the Brown charts, the Nifty charts, all that stuff. So I basically got schooled that summer. Played jam sessions with the guys. We weren't supposed to jam, but we jammed when we were off. We found a little closet and played. And so I came back a lot better player and made the top band at Florida State. And kind of at that time when I showed up, Martin Bejarano showed up as a piano player. Martin's now played with Roy Haynes and countless other people, and now teaches at Miami. He's still a good friend, and I'm kind of bummed. We were supposed to play a show here in Miami, in Charlotte. He was supposed to come up from Miami and play the Beckler Jazz Museum, and as with most of all my shows for this year, they're all canceled right now.
Yep.
So I finished there with my undergrad in jazz and in percussion performance, and because the rhythm section was winning awards, this rhythm section with me and Martin and the guys, they asked me to stay and do my master's and teach. So I got real clever. I wanted to have some students, so I made drum set lessons. I made it an accredited class for non-majors and majors.
Nice.
So I immediately had a studio of 17 drum set students. We would do master class. I was really trying to develop a program as if I might be on faculty. Unfortunately, the position wasn't created. So I was engaged to be married. My wife, my fiance at the time, my wife now for a billion years, she lived here in Charlotte. So I moved to Charlotte and have since just made the best out of it. Honestly, when I moved here, it was kind of a black hole. There was only a handful of people that were really doing music. There were people doing music on a national level. It just wasn't recognized as a national type of artist city. There were a lot of national artists and international artists who lived here, but they didn't really necessarily know it. It was almost like they were here to be off the grid. Now, there are countless national artists and international artists that live in Charlotte and are very active in the Charlotte music scene, as well as hopping on planes and going everywhere. I started playing gigs. And eventually, through the correspondence of other friends and being involved in some different church activities around Charlotte, meeting some players, I got asked to play drums with a singer-songwriter named Jason Upton. And so I started traveling internationally with him, and I've done that for the last 15 years. I played with a guy named Chad Lawson. We had a trio together. Your dad and I knew you and your little before you were born. And I met your dad because we were playing in a band called Hip Shack together, which is like a funk group. And we had the opportunity to go and play a lot of tennis events around the world and travel and do that. So I've just sort of been, in a lot of ways, I'm just a working musician. Just kind of, and in the last 2 or 3 years, having worked with Jason, I kind of developed the ability to help manage people and just kind of on an very independent level, learn a lot about how to put out your music independently and within the context as the best I can be successful at that. I'm familiar with labels and all that stuff. So, learning the music business was more or less like on the job training because it wasn't really a topic of conversation when I was in school. It wasn't certain schools like Berkeley, but the Florida State, it might've been one music business class. I don't know, but it wasn't really anything I was interested in because I just wanted to play music.
Right.
I didn't realize that when I got out, I was in business for myself. So it's been an interesting ride. I play a lot. I'm in my studio here and I'm able to track remotely, and I've learned how to record and send tracks and work remotely. I've been doing that for a few years, and then teaching online, and then putting out my own music, as well as continuing to contribute drums to other people's, playing drums with other artists and then recording. So, I think when you get into it, and I really learned it when I was doing triathlon. I know it's a random thing, but I learned a lot when I was doing triathlon, and there's kind of like less than 1% of the triathlon community is able to facilitate going pro, meaning they make their entire income and that's all they do, between corporate sponsorships. And when you start to look at the drumming world, the guys that are simply just making all their money from behind the set, is a really low, it's probably less than 1%. And what I mean by that is that does not include, they're not teaching lessons. Maybe they're teaching lessons, but they're not on faculty at a university at all. They're not, that doesn't mean, they could put out a book or a DVD, but they're primarily like traveling, hopping on airplanes, and they're playing in a band or touring or whatever. That's their main thing. for me, I would say that depending on depending on the year and the finances, it can be 70-30, where like the 30% would be consulting, lessons, teaching, other things to create revenue. Most of it's in management and consulting for me. And and it's all within the music business,
Right.
but I think diversifying is a really good thing. And that's why, I think it's good you're learning about the repertoire. For you, learning the repertoire that's out there can give you a real education on what's not out there. And when you see, and if you do any research on entrepreneurialism and things that really hit the market and do well, a lot of it's just simply like a person saw something that wasn't happening. Like they're like, I wanted to find something that would do this and it didn't. So I made this app that did it. And all of a sudden you have this app that everybody's using, right? I think that's what happens in the percussion world. It's like everybody was tired of using gaff tape for their drums. And someone was like, what if we did these sticky things and stuck them on there? And all of a sudden moon gel,
Right.
or whatever, so I think in repertoire land, you can learn a lot by studying the repertoire. So that's a really like quick version of like where I came from. I basically was like a public school kid. I went the total route. At the time when I did my master's degree in jazz studies, that was the terminal degree. It's now more than that. Because of the way I'm wired, I often think about doing a DMA, but right now it's just not in the I mean, currently with COVID-19, it's definitely not in the cards, but in terms of like, I feel like I've got a lot. I've learned how to. I've always been a continual learner, and I think the education process has changed a lot. And so YouTube, online lessons, online curriculum. There's a lot of things you can do just without really having to dedicate yourself to a physical location. Yeah, I do think I'm seeing that question. I really do think that a music business class is important. But going back to what I was just saying, I think there's a lot of things that you can glean from entrepreneurs, online courses. There's so many different things for independent entrepreneurs out there that if you wanted to learn the music business, just learn business in general and think of yourself as an entrepreneur, because you are your business. Like I am my brand. And so whenever I'm putting music out, I'm mindful of the imagery. I'm mindful of the music that I'm putting out. And then in terms of the marketing, I didn't have a formal music business class, so I tend to try and find information online, even if I have to pay for it, and educate myself on the ever evolving music business. You've really got to understand the playlist game and the different revenue streams that are available when you're putting music out there. And that also goes with like if you're just putting out drumming videos or any kind of content. If you want to use that general term of just content creation, as soon as you have content creation, you need to have some type of platform and education on how to monetize that.
Right.
And for musicians, it's really quantity as much as quality. It's not just quality. It has to be good, but you have to put out a lot. And I've learned that I'm currently in the midst, I was running late today, Gage, because I had all my mics set up to do some recording for a friend of mine needed 2 tracks done with video. So I sent him over that yesterday and the drums were set up and mic'd. And so I was trying to get some demo ideas to producer I'm sending for my 2 new singles that I have. So, cause I'm trying to work with a producer on these. So it's like, I'm just scratching for like whatever time I can get to like put some drum ideas down. Cause that's a whole nother conversation. This is the composition process, but yes, I do agree. I think music classes are great, but I think you can always do formal online training with colleges, but there's so much information out there now. And I think if you graft in the world of entrepreneurialism and independent entrepreneurialism, you're going to find a whole lot. If you supplant that or if you mesh that into the music world, you're going to have a lot of additional stuff. You know what I mean? Like watch the content creation of a Gary Vaynerchuk, watch the content creation of Mike's lessons, Mike, just look at the drum world, look at the entrepreneurial world and find those overlaps. And I think that'll be a good place to start for anybody. That's where I've kind of been. So, and that's where I'm at. So I'm now still performing quite a bit. Obviously on a little bit of a hiatus right now, like most artists, because of the current situation we're under. But I'm trying to stay active. I've got a lot of friends of mine that know that I record and have video set up. So they're like, hey, I'd like to do this live video, but it's just me and you playing. It's a new single. Or churches that have been asking me to cut drums for services and doing it here with video. So having a remote setup has been a smart idea. I was reluctant 2 or 3 years ago to do it, invest the money, but I'm glad that I did. So
Yeah.
That's been really helpful right now.
Good. That's good to hear. I know, especially for percussionists, for drummers, that stuff gets pricey. I mean, instruments alone, they're big. They take up a lot of space, so you have to have the space for them. And then to record them adds a whole nother layer.
Yeah, it is, and it's just, again, just trying to find, I have learned the less. I mean, you can't do it on your own, and so it really is helpful to have a community around you and get to know the people that you're friends with, and you never know what happens. Like, I have a friend, and he took the online class at Berkeley for Ableton, so I've been jumping in with him, and not just Ableton, because I have functional skills with an Ableton, but it's like, I would really like to, while the downtime's happening, I'm really working on how can I construct my music live and like expand a piano trio, but knowing like the pianist, like who I would prefer to use is Chad Lawson, and Chad's really good at looping on a grand piano. The bass player I would probably use is well versed with acoustic and electric bass and knows how to do live looping. I sing, play piano, and play drums. How can I incorporate all three of those with Ableton to create an experience that's like Go-Go Penguin on crack? Like, I really am trying to figure out a way to like what if Pat Metheny, Tycho, and Go-Go Penguin had this love child and a live experience where there's elements of jazz, elements of like, I sent a demo over to a friend of mine because I'd like him to sing on it. One of my newest singles is going to have someone rapping and someone singing. I'm singing. I have 2 other vocals. My daughter's singing, but I really have this, like, now I've added in this sort of a lyrical line in what would be the main part of the song. And I sent it to a friend of mine. It's like, dear God, this is like Peter Gabriel meets Soundgarden meets, something else. I can't remember what reference point. I was like, wow, that's a lot of random. I got scared. I was like, that's kind of cool. And at the same time, it's going to be hard I really want to have this way of like congealing it into an idea that feels like it still represents like what I'm doing compositionally. So I'm digressing, as you can see, because when you're back in your shed and you've been working on your music, you're like, that's what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
But so yeah, all that to say, I'm currently working on 3 new singles. One of them's ready to go. It's just I'm waiting on my friend Chad Lawson to finish the piano part. It's a composition entitled Brother John. I'm also finishing up a video edit. I'm editing video for I'm entering the Tiny Desk contest again with that song. The day before they announced that our state was going to go on a stay-home mandate, I called my friends and we just set up in my living room and did the best we could to record this song. So it was written for a guy that you wouldn't have known, but your dad would have. John Alexander was a very well-known saxophone player in town. He was a great composer, and he really gave me my first break. And when I first moved to town, I started playing in his band. And when I found out he had cancer, I remember sitting down at the piano, and it was kind of like my way of interceding and praying for his family. And I came up with this. I just started writing a song, and it took me about 1.5 years to finish it just because of my schedule. And I've been demoing it. I tried to play it with my quartet, and just wasn't where I wanted it to be. So I finally finished like what I would consider the version that would really pay homage to him in the way that I could.
Right.
So so Chad's working on that. So I've got some new music coming out, which is exciting, and that's been a whole new adventure, putting out my own music and kind of being an artist. And that's a little bit different. But in terms of my music, that's what I'm doing. So I'm teaching, I'm doing my own music, I'm playing with other artists. I do some consulting via my own company. So I kind of have various revenue streams, and that helps.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I'd love to talk about a little bit, that whole producing your own music kind of thing. I feel like for people my age who see artists putting out music, they look at it as some impossible feat that's like you need a producer, you need a label, like all those things if you want to make it big or put stuff out. And to see people like you who's putting out your own stuff, being successful with it, and having really good, use the word content, having really good stuff put out there. Um, what was that process like? What led you to want to do that kind of thing? Was it out of just wanting to get it out there for everybody, or out of necessity, or what was the process of that like?
Yeah, I had I wanted to I kind of had a few ideas on my phone, and it started with a conversation with Ron Brendel, who's a bass player in town. He's a dear friend of mine, and I was like, I kind of have a song, but I don't know if it's finished. He's like, why wouldn't it be finished? I played it for him. He's like, I don't know. I mean, once you solo on and everything, it's kind of why wasn't it finished? So that was the first part. I was like, maybe this is finished. And then I realized I was getting melodies all the time. I've been wanting to write, and I just took cues from the songwriters that I know that are always using their iPhone. Like they're just on their phone or their journal. They're, even if it's a fragmented idea, they're documenting it because it happens in the moment. These things come and they go. And if you think you're going to remember it, it's kind of like when you have a dream and you're like, oh, I'll totally remember it. I'll write it down. You won't. Or if you do, great job. Because I don't. So I just started using my iPhone and kind of documenting ideas as they would come. And then for a while I had like a day, like it would usually be like Monday, I would sit down and just go, okay, Monday morning, I'm going to listen to my iPhone messages. I'm going to catalog some of them. And then I'm going to kind of get a system of like, well, I want to go back to that. Or if I felt like one was really like, I'm really feeling that one today, I would come in here, my piano's right here. I'd pull my piano out and I'd just get after it, just start working on it, get the chords down, get the melody, taking it off of the iPhone, whether I was on pitch or not, because I don't have perfect pitch. It's like, okay, I'm off pitch, but it's relatively this key, working out the chords, and then just jamming, really like starting to iron out ideas, and then I would write those ideas down and record them in Logic 10. I use that as a digital workstation, digital audio workstation, a DAW. And so I would record, and then, or even just put the piano on with my speakers and record it into a voice memo, me singing the melody and playing. And so that's where it started. And I typically play piano and sing the melodies. And so whether it was a chord progression or a melody, I would re-record that back into my iPhone, keep it on me. And then when I'm driving to gigs, if I had a chord progression, I just sing melodies over top of it and try and work on lead lines and melodies for these chord changes while I was going to gigs or on the plane going wherever. And so that started that. So songs come different ways, but they always come to the moment, and the iPhone memo became a really good resource for me in terms of cataloging those ideas. And then I started I have Sibelius and MuseScore, depending on which one's giving me trouble. And I would chart them out, and I started a quartet. It became my quartet. It became a quartet with my name on it because the guys were like, why don't we call it your band? You're bringing in songs. So I branded it the Alfred Sergel Quartet. We finally went in the studio, and it wasn't perfect. It was a jazz document record. So meaning we just played the tunes down one time, and it was sort of like democratic process. How'd you feel about that? We picked the one that we liked, and that we moved on. I was playing it for my friend Chad because I was like, I like it, but it's not like exactly. I mean, I would love it to be better. And he's like, you should just put it out, because if you don't put it out, you're never going to put it out. And come to find out, that was a really good move just to put it out, because it established my profiles on all the different DSPs, digital service platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Prime, Deezer, you name it, all the ones that are out there, Tidal. So I established that, and then I was already writing other stuff, and my demos didn't sound like the stuff we were playing in the quartet, because I wasn't singing along. So I had this demo of a song called Why Close. And it was the original one where I'm clapping and singing, kind of the way I wrote the song after the YMCA was closed. I got in my car and it was closed, and I got this melody and this kind of chant thing. And so I played the demo for Chad, and I was like, dude, I think I'm going to re-release this song, because we'd done it with the quartet, but I think I'm going to do it with my vocal. He goes, dude, this sounds really cool. I didn't know you were singing along. I said, actually, a lot of my songs have that. And I was playing him all these new compositions. Chad kind of helped me come up with a release strategy then for what would have been the release strategy last year, 2019. So September 2018, I released the quartet record. And that fall, after I released that, I went back in the studio with Chad Lawson and John Ray and did a trio record. And they both have their own studios. So I had recorded and did everything for Why Closed, which was a single I did of that song, right here in the shed. Sent the tracks to them. They recorded their parts at their place, sent it back to me. I sent it to a guy to mix, and we mastered it and put it out. For whatever reason, that got some attention on an editorial playlist and has over 300,000 streams now. So it's definitely done way better than I thought. And I have an idea. I know what my strategy was going in, because I definitely had a strategy for trying to get playlisted, specifically an editorial playlist. But there's no like strategy. I mean, it's just kind of, you can try your best and do everything you think is going to work, and then it happens, or it might not. You don't know. Because I put that single out to introduce the idea of me singing along with my melodies. And then I put out my record, which it did good. It got a lot of attention and did well on the radio. And the streaming side was a little bit slower, primarily because I didn't get playlisted on anything. But still, for me, it was an important project to invest in and put out. I independently funded it. So I took out a business loan, and I'm still paying that off. And because I did radio, I did a marketing campaign. So I basically hired a publicist. I hired a radio promoter. I had everything that a label would do. I basically provided my own label services, and financed it independently. I think the success of it was that I put out something that was beginning to sound and go the direction that I wanted to go, which was kind of meshing all the influences I've had, which those influences are everything from Elvin Jones to Phil Collins and Dave Grohl. So, I mean, it's like the gamut of musical, they're all drummers and band leaders, but the musical style is very different. Right. And so I wanted to lean heavy on vibe and experience, and then mesh in some of the improvisational aspects when it felt like the music, when it was made sense in the music. So it was definitely, and I'm moving more that direction, hybriding the two, where working really hard. Like, I'm not just playing the drums, I'm really crafting a drum part. I'm really mindful of the cymbal choices, the snare drum sounds. Even what I was working on today, it's like I'm thinking about it more like a pop rock musician than I am a jazz musician. What I mean by that, and that's a real limiting, jazz is expanded to where that could sound, that might be offensive, which I don't mean it to be. What I mean is I'm really thinking about the drum part like if I was crafting a signature drum part for a pop rock record, which I've done a lot of that. So it's like, what does this snare sound like? What pitch is going to work best? So a lot of my demo process right here in the studio is the song's complete. I kind of have the arrangement where I want it. And now I'm working on not just the drum part, but also what sounds am I looking for? Do I want open toms? Do I want really thuddy Ludwig drums? Do I want a gutsy dry snare like off a Beck record? Do I want something that's a little more ringy like Manu Katché? Or what is the sonic reference point that I'm looking for that's going to match the vibe of the song? That takes me a little bit longer, frankly. Yeah. And so but it's a lot of fun, and it's the benefit of, like, I have an interface, I have a laptop, I've got the software, I've got a little shed that, that I took a loan out to have a shed. It's like getting a small car loan, you just pay out a little bit. So there's a lot of things on the business side that you're like, okay, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to invest in this. And it was just the other day, I mean, my streaming income is like, it's not a lot, but it's enough. And I was like, man, you know what? After a year, I will have paid off this part of the investment I made to be able to record in my studio. And you start working these things out. It's not like fat cash, at all. And also there's just some decisions you have to make. Like I'm still very active with playing with other people, but I like the creative process of making my own music. And I think, you know, for years, I mean, you and I both are you're training in school. You'll come out of school the same as me, a continual learner. And a lot of the learning process is emulation, and you have there's an imitation process, and you're finding and there's a circle of it where you're emulating a player or emulating a style, and then you find your way and yourself, and you kind of go in this cycle. And for me, you know, I constantly have to release myself to be myself and not try to be like, well, I'm not going to try and be Nate Smith and do that. I'm not going to try and be Mark Juliana and do beat music. I'm not going to try and do this. I feel like I'm finding that, like, what is my voice, and being okay that that's what it is, you know, whether it's like popular or not. It's kind of important for me as a creative person to put it out there. And that's an entirely different conversation, probably, that I call unconditional creativity. Creativity has a real power in our lives to give us happiness and joy. And if we're always commodifying it, you're going to be more, you're going to find other ways to find joy and happiness. And that's why substance abuse happens for a lot of people. But, you know, I just found that, like, I have to be in an active mode of creating, or I start to kind of like wither as a person. So what I mean by that, it's like some of that stuff needs to be put out and just put out. And if it makes some money, great. Sometimes you just need to do it to do it.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it's just good for you. It's like I have students that are working on a Cerrone snare drum exercise, and they get the number 1 and they get to that flam section. And it's like, well, there's a reason why you should work on flam taps, alternating flams, flam inverts, flam accents, flam paradiddles. There's a reason why all these rudiments are necessary components to, you know, working on that additionally. So when you come back to that exercise, you're able to maneuver the flams with ease, you know. And it's like, there's a joy in that. Okay, I just want to go. Like, I saw a friend of mine, Justin Barnes, phenomenal drummer out of Atlanta. I've known him for a long time, and he's just doing Facebook Live practice pad chop sessions, man. Just rimming, and it's like, it's awesome. It's keeping, you know, it's like he could easily, you know, be doing any number of things. It's like you and I. This is engaging. This is good for us, you know. Have this conversation. You're working on a project. But for me, like, I'm excited to talk to you. I mean, COVID-19 separating all of us, and so it's nice to just talk with another person, especially about drums and music. But the creative process, if you put a condition on it all the time, the conditioning part, the condition part of the commodification part can steal the joy that it's supposed to give you. And so I've walked through that. I still walk through that, where it's like, man, I really want to make this a popular song, and it's like, I can't control that. What I can control is, like, doing something that I feel like is an authentic expression and the best possibility of that composition, you know? So all that to say, the composition process, the production process is always kind of going. And at a certain point, you just have to release it.
Right.
A certain point, you're just like, okay, and that's why recently I had a producer reach out, a friend of mine, he's a producer, and he's like, hey, I really like what you did on Why Closed. Can we work together? And so now I'm collaborating with, I worked with a producer before. It was more on the sonic side and the mix side. This is more like I'm reaching out and, like, trying to stretch to a different side of things. And so I'm sharing with him the demos, sharing with him some of the initial ideas, and hoping he comes back with sort of like, you know, helping me construct and formulate it. Because sometimes the songs can feel a little bit like a Frankenstein. You know, you've got different sections. You're trying to figure out how it really flows. And then there's, as Pat Metheny would say, there's the recorded experience, and then there's a live experience, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're shaping a recorded experience in the studio, that has a different energy and takes a lot of different components. There's layers to it. There's arrangement things you have to do differently. So you can kind of tell that if you were to go back and look at Why Closed, which was done on the Quartet record, mm-hmm. and look at Why Closed, the single that I put out, radically different. Like, the constructed experience of Why Closed, the single version, which was the one with me singing on it with claps, it's like, you know, piano solo by Chad Lawson. It was very, like, I was very mindful of, like, I want this to be 4 minutes, and I want it to be, like, engaging from start to finish.
Yeah.
you know, and that's the kind of thing when you're working on a produced experience of that, you have to, in some way, shape, or form, you have to be mindful of that. If you're just doing a jazz record and you're doing like, hey, this is my tune and we're just going to improvise and play this thing the way it happens, rehearse it a couple of times and then press record and go, that's a documentation record. That's documenting just the moment. And those are beautiful. And that's what the quartet record was. And I was like, I think the music that I'm working on, I was like, let me continue to work on creating these recorded experiences. And now with COVID-19, I'm kind of like, let me learn Ableton Live. Let me learn live so that I know how to loop live. And so that I can begin to construct a live experience that's engaging and fun, but also plays this music the way I hear it in my head, not just jamming. It leaves moments for improvisation, but it's a collective experience. It's like, you know, like a band you would see, where it's like, there's really like, it's really like a lot of fun to watch because there's interaction, but there's a tightness about how you're reproducing what was produced in the studio. Every band has to do it. So if you go see like Coldplay and you hear their latest record, they're going back after the producing, they're going to rehearsals with probably somebody in there. It might be the band, but a lot of times the band will have other people sitting around and you're like, how do we create what we did on the record live so it has that energy and engages our audience? Because any band, any artist that I've worked with, it's Jason's a little different because it's like his songs are just like, it's like James Taylor. It's like the songs and the arrangements play themselves. So, when we do it live, it's very similar when we do it in the studio. So it's kind of like, we're just playing the music as is. We've worked out the arrangements and we like where it's at and we just capture it, live. As of recently in the last few records, he's done some overdubs on vocals, but before that, everything was done very much like a jazz record. It was just, this is what it is. And we played it as many times. It was very old school in that we played the track and we played it and we played it until Jason was happy, until we were all like collectively, maybe not just Jason, but Jason was like, because he wouldn't overdub his vocal. He was so consistent. It was like, we were just trying to get Tom Petty would call it lightning in a bottle, just trying to find the magic, and I love that. I really do. There's an element that I do in my own studio. That was kind of why I was running late today. I was like, man, I don't want to overdub this drum part. I want to get this, like, I want to move from 5/8 to 6/8 to 7. I'm writing this song that's called The Falling Out, and it goes from 5/8 to 6, 5/8 to 3/4 back, and then kind of stays in 5/8. It's kind of got it's kind of 5/8 except for a section in 3/4. And I've got a couple different things happening, and I was like, so you're kind of, working out how to move from the other one and make it feel like it makes sense. But I'll digress because it's exciting. But I love the studio. I love the producing. I like the creative process. So, and conversations have a creative process. Did you have, I know we're coming up on the hour. So did you have any specific questions that you wanted me to answer for your project?
No, I mean, I kind of just came into it wanting to leave it open to discuss, especially like you said, the creative process. Because I think that that's something that should be discussed more a lot of times. And so to hear your ideas behind it, I know for me, a lot of what I do, like in terms of creating, is more taking something that someone's already done and trying to put my own spin on it. Because I don't know that I'm quite comfortable with my ability to put something out there yet, just like in terms of my knowledge of how things happen. And
I just saw the comment for I just saw the comment from Take My Tempo.
Yeah,
you're welcome. I don't really know any other way to be. If there's one thing I've got, it's passion. If I'm lacking in ability or talent, it's passion.
Yeah, man. But yeah, I really appreciate everything that you've had to say. It's been really nice.
I did want to wrap up. I did want to give you a little something that just from my own personal experience. The education process, formal training, is unbelievable. Like, it's such a gift, and the fact that you have the talent level to like pay for your college and do that, you're obviously talented. I think, for me, it's been systematically like defragging my hard drive, if you will, and getting away. I mean, I think being around rock and roll musicians and guys, producers, people that that aren't from a formal school of music, if you will, like they learned how to play guitar and piano, and they play all the instruments and they know some chords, but it's like, it's so raw. You know, that creative process is something I'm trying to bring myself into that and be free in that.
Mm-hmm.
So like, even like the latest music I'm doing, I'm like, I kind of was hearing lyrics on this one part on the Falling Out, and I'm a big Soundgarden fan, big Rush fan, Peter Gabriel, Sting, you name any of the most popular, I mean, Genesis, even the, you know, I'm into so much pop music. And it's like, I was like, well, why not? Like, why couldn't this section of the song have this lyrical thing that lifts the song, and you're like, holy crap, I didn't see that coming.
Right.
And I think at a certain point when you get out of school, the continual process of just opening yourself up and being around people that may not have had a formal education. A lot of the most successful musicians and entrepreneurs I know are self-taught, you know? And so I remember taking a lesson with Carter McLean, phenomenal drummer. And when he started to write stuff out, he wrote it in such a way I'd never seen anybody write stuff before. He was, the way he thought of, the way he quantified rhythm and thought about how to show me this idea was so different than anybody had been around. I was like, and that's and I left the lesson. I'm like, that was weird. But then, you know, the next morning I'm having coffee and I was like, that was amazing. That was amazing to experience how someone that gifted and talented and successful in their own right with their own branding in their own, you know, drumming career. Like the way that he's gone after it and the way he's, you know, just the way he thinks differently about it rather than, you know, the kind of the system that you and I've been taught. So I think there's a way of like, I just think there's ways to like, I would only encourage you to continually place yourself in situations where you're stretched, where you're a bit uncomfortable, like this, you know, because a lot of some of the most creative, I was listening to like the latest Beck record and some of the stuff that Beck did, because he's got Joey Waronker on drums, and I'm a huge fan of Joey's drumming, his creativity. Matt Chamberlain, Aaron Sterling is another great. I mean, he's kind of a new guy, but like the older cats, the older Los Angeles guys are like Joey Waronker and Matt Chamberlain and a host of other drummers that are just super creative in terms of, and Aaron's right up there in terms of creativity. But the thing is, you see there's a risk and a chance, and there's this constant, like, all I can say is like exposing yourself to creativity and music making or creative processes that are outside of a formalized structure. It's a lot more available than it used to be because of YouTube.
Right.
But you'll find that the production process, like I'm trying to implement some of that kind of what I would consider non-formal training, or just like some of the stuff I see in the rock and roll and the pop world all the time, just like trying to break out of that and fuse that into the music I'm creating. And I could only encourage you, because you're going to come out with a phenomenal education, incredible chops. You're gonna be able to do whatever you want. What will help you is to have all that, like that kind of that childlike creativity where we both started, where we're just banging on stuff and we didn't overanalyze what we were doing. We just did it.
Right.
Getting back to that place. I mean, could easily preach this, but it's like getting back to that before, you know, like that place of like second birth, where we're like, we kind of come back into this with fresh eyes and ears, like as if we've never done it before, and it's like fresh. That will keep you young. I heard a wise man say that, he said, wisdom is the ability to continually be surprised. When we're not surprised, it's because we feel like we need to know the answer to everything. Mm-hmm. And that is a beautiful, wonderful thing, that we become these answer men, or men and women, when we're in the education process. We're around people that are supposed to give us the answer, or maybe they don't know. But I think the process of creativity is a constant like exposition to being surprised. Like, oh crap, I didn't know you could do that. That's awesome. Oh crap, you can do that. You know, I think that's like, pardon my French, but it's like, that's what you're looking for. You know, you're looking for that, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm trying to not have my 6-year-old say crap. So that is, you know, it's all G for me. Anyway, that was my point, was just like, I would want that for you. You know, there was, like when I'm, you know, like if I had first met you and you're barely playing before you went to college and you're a collegiate academic percussionist, I would have loved to seen how you were approaching the instrument. And I would only encourage you to continually try not try to just put yourself in places where you go back to that. Like I try to tell my students, like, how do you have fun? I don't know. Do you still jam to records?
Right.
Yeah, you should, man. Do you still pick out beats that you dig on the radio and like and learn the exact beat that the guy played and the exact fill? I stopped doing that, and then I tried to do it, and I was like, holy crap, that feels hard. It sounds so easy, but what the guy's doing in time and the way he did it, and he doesn't crash and he hits, I was like, I need to do that more. And all of a sudden you're like, you're kind of back at square one, and it's kind of a beautiful place. That was the only thing. I just wanted to, if you know, with finishing up, that was the only thing. I don't have my phone. I was going to see what time it is, but that was the only thing. Oh, my phone's right there. I was just going to look, and I had my laptop up. That's why. That was the only thing I wanted to finish with, was like always trying to find those moments that will continually keep you in like a, oh, wow, I didn't know you could do that. Because that's the one gift I probably have past any ability or talent or whatever. One talent is like, I'm just genuinely inspired. Like it doesn't take a lot for me to get going in the morning. I could be easily distracted. You know, it's not ADD. It's just kind of like, okay, what are we doing today? Like, what can we, you know, obviously I've got to work and do work, but when it gets to music, it's like, sky's the limit, you know?
Yeah, man. Sweet. Well, I appreciate your time and your wisdom and your gifts that you're willing to share with everybody.
Yeah, man.
Right now, I think a lot of people can use that, because there's a lot of people just sitting at home, don't quite know what to do.
Including me.
Yeah, me too. So
well, dude, have a good rest of your day. I hope your project goes well. If you need any follow-up from me, just let me know.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Okay, see you, bud.
See ya.